Hello and welcome back to Brothers of the Arcana. As always, I am Alex Aldea. I'm here with my co-host,
Dave.
Go ahead, Dave. This is where you talk.
And tonight we're joined by a bunch of brethren from the Masonic Roundtable. You guys want to introduce yourselves quickly?
Yes, that would be fantastic. We'll start with you,
John Ruark. Yeah, that's me. John Ruark, past master of the Patriot Lodge, number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia.
Ooh, very nice. Jason?
That's my typical intro. Jason.
Hey everybody, Jason Richards here, past master of Acacia Lodge number 16 in Clifton, Virginia, member of Lafayette Lodge number 79 in Zanesville, Ohio.
Fantastic. Joseph?
All right, we're doing Joseph. What am I getting yelled at? You my mom or something?
It's actually
Are you in Ming's bedroom right now, by the way? Like you got all these comic book figures and
this is my my sanctorum. This is where I go for privacy and to get away from loud noises and stuff.
I thought your sanctorum was the bathroom.
Yes, that's after dinner. Yeah, hi, Joe Martinez. Let's see. Past master and currently worshipful master of Manassas Lodge number 182 in Manassas, Virginia. Member of a whole bunch of other lodges and a whole bunch of other jurisdictions. I like all the things and all the dues cards. So great to be here.
Thanks, you guys, for being here. I feel so less than now, Dave, because we never announced that we're masters or past masters of anything. So I will say I am past master of Essex Lodge number 7 in Caldwell, New Jersey, 2016, and past master of God. I was always going to make a horrible mistake and say something else, but I would instead say Congdon Overlook Lodge number 163 in Bernardsville, New Jersey, 2023, and past Grand Chaplain. So yes,
yeah, and I was past master Colonial Prospect 2023 and 2024. So
that is correct.
Rolling off those 2 years back to back.
The best 2 years in Masonry.
Yeah, absolutely.
So guys, first of all, thank you so much for wanting to be on the show until I wore John down. I literally tracked him down at a dinner and I said, when are you going to be on the show? And he's like, I've successfully avoided you this long. And now here you are cornering me. So I have no choice but to wrangle the boys and appear on the program. So thank you so much for
it. Worked.
Apparently, if you bother someone enough, they'll come on your show, which is wonderful. No, thank you. Honestly, we really appreciate it, and we have a lot of cool questions that I think we're gonna put to you, as if we didn't know most of these answers and weren't already Freemasons. But we don't mostly talk about Masonry on the show. Actually, we do talk about a lot of esoteric things, but not Masonry, for a whole bunch of reasons. And now we're sort of starting to push into that market a little bit. So who better than you three experts to help us to inaugurate that sort of thing? So, and you guys can answer.
I mean, if you guys want to just talk like esoterics, we're fine with that too.
Yeah, I mean, totally. Let's do it all. I mean, it's a fair amount of a show, so we can definitely start us off. So, do you guys agree that Freemasonry is sometimes or maybe often called the hidden school of the West? And if so, what's really hidden?
That's a new one for me.
Yeah. I have an answer.
You've not heard that one, eh?
I will go. I will go first and say
I will play
before Jason interrupts. I'll say no. If it was, not anymore. And I think we're seeing that. I think a lot of social media today is there's a ton of articles being shared, a couple specifically being shared about the decline in Freemasonry and the reasons for it. And I would agree with every single one of those reasons. Maybe we used to be, but I mean, I think if you go as far back as like the silent generation, the 1920s folks, they were complaining about the very same things that we're complaining now, and they didn't have a membership problem. You know what I mean? So, but they were complaining about just the lack of learning in the organization, right? It turned into a social club. And we've had, based on generation to generation, whether it was the boomers or Gen Xers, or people that came later, it's just progressively changed. So I don't think we can honestly call Freemasonry that hidden school anymore, because it doesn't apply, and that's not what we see. It gets practiced in some lodges, I'm sure, like your lodge and other lodges that we're blessed to go visit, but in general, the organization doesn't meet that criteria anymore.
Wow. Guys, agree, disagree? What do you think?
I respectfully disagree.
Ooh, John, get in there.
Yeah, so, which is interesting because I think to your point, it used to be, right? It was designed to be by its structure, which still remains today. And so we have the skeleton still of its former self. And so it's a little bit of leading the horse to water, right? You can't make them drink. And I think we're at that point in a couple generations down the road where, the door is right there, and it's just only certain people see the door and decide to go through it. If RJ were here, he would. I love his metaphor that he uses, that it's the outer porch of other mystery schools.
Okay.
Because, and I could say from my single data point, I would have not been exposed to a whole plethora of philosophies and traditions and rituals, just if I had gone on my current path. And so without Freemasonry, it's not Freemasonry inherently that has all these nuggets of wisdom, but it's certainly showing the light on things that I would have never been exposed to before Masonry.
May I make a counterpoint?
No.
Directly,
parliamentary procedure. Go.
Yes, parliamentary procedure. He attacked me by name, and I don't like it. No, I think John's absolutely right.
Feelings. Yeah.
Feelings hurt. No, I think John's absolutely right. I mean, I'll just go out and be the bad guy in the room and just say, more so than the porch, it's the gateway drug to other things, right? It's that first toke, right, before you get into the racier types of things. And I'll
gotta rub it on your gums. Right. Sorry.
And I'll 100% agree with that. But I mean, if you look at, back to my original point, if you look at the structure and organization of Freemasonry today, it's a social club. Now, does it lead you to now, if I wasn't a Mason, I would have never met Alex, and I never would have met John, and I never would have met Jason and learned about other cool things. But in and of itself, for the most part, with very few exceptions, it's a social club. It's not a place of learning. But John said in a much nicer way, it is the porchway to other awesome things. But
so I'm going to take a bit of a different approach. First and foremost, I'm getting a whole lot of like Ship of Theseus vibes here. Like, you have the bones, but if you change out the bones and change out the people, is it still the same organization? Right. But when you look at it, like, I came into Masonry very opposed to esoterics. It wasn't my bag. I didn't want anything to do with it. And it was through my interaction with spiritual men that I eventually came around and started really getting into that. And it wasn't inherently Masonry that sparked that, my my genesis as a seeker. It was the men, or a subset of the men in Masonry who did that. And so I think there's a lot that you can say about the mysteries of the Masonic ritual, but if you're just memorizing the words in the catechism, or you're just putting on a degree because that's what you do, without any further like interrogation, like you're not going to get, like, there's no spiritual osmosis happening without that active mentorship and kind of extrapolation and expansion.
It sounds like it's not just mentorship, but it's a clear intention to move into that path. I mean, it sounds like, I was speaking with a good buddy of mine who's also a past Grand Master, and he is probably one of the top 3 ritualists in the state. Dave knows who I'm talking about. and we're having cigars this afternoon, and he's not esoteric, but he's an extraordinarily phenomenal ritualist. He just doesn't have the intention to move into that path. And it's not for lack of potential membership, because I'm sure he's been around a lot of other folks that were in this, what they call clearinghouse of esotericism, which is Freemasonry, I suppose, in that sense. So, yeah, I mean, do you feel like somebody put their hand on you and said, hey, Jason, you might not be esoteric, but I've got this thing I want to show you. Come over here, little boy.
Well,
no, I'm kidding.
There's candy in my van.
Yeah, people put hands on me in all the wrong ways, and that's why I haven't been back to the shrine. No, it was really getting to know people of diverse spiritual backgrounds, and so I really leaned into the ecumenical nature of Freemasonry, being cool. Brotherhood of man under a fatherhood of God. And I came from a rather strict religious upbringing where, I was taught like, hey, like, you follow this because this is the only thing that's right. And it was really my exposure to men and brothers of varied faith systems, and my willingness to engage in conversation and search for that mutual understanding that really ended up helping me dive deep into a lot of things. And now I consider myself to follow that contemplative path, and like I never would have thought that would have even been possible for me were it not for people like Joe and Robert and John.
And what's amazing is it's like hand in glove for Jason now. Like the Jason of today is very different than the Jason I first met. You know what I mean? And
okay.
Yeah, it's just absolutely amazing to see that transformation in someone. And I think that's why I think a lot of us are still involved in Freemasonry, honestly, is for those small nuggets of just
still hanging on
transformation. You see that one dude that goes through the degrees, every so often. It's like, oh, he gets it. I know why he's here. We're here for the same reason. Let's gravitate towards that person and just do all the amazing things we can for that person to help their journey. But I was like the complete opposite. I joined Freemasonry for the weird stuff, right? I consider myself a Dan Brown Mason. I didn't have any Masonry that I know of in my family. And I did not know, or I didn't think I knew a single Freemason. And I just knocked at the door of a lodge after probably like a few months after reading Da Vinci Code and a lot of other Dan Brown stuff. And was extremely disappointed once I became a Freemason. I'm like, whoa, this is not like what's in the books. It's differenter,
They lied to me.
My next youngest peer was 45 years older than me, and I was like, cool, I'm friends with everybody's great granddad now, So it was a bit of a different experience.
So why do you guys think that, honestly, why do you think that there's so many Masonic, you guys have covered tons of these Masonic mysteries and talked about in your 400 episodes. What's one revelation that really kind of blew your mind? Something that really kind of stuck out with you that you've covered so far that was like, whoa.
Like a favorite episode or some? Yeah,
just anything or even gem. A topic that you're like, hey, you know what? We've moved into something that's really different now or fascinating. Does that make sense?
Waiting to see who goes first. No, I mean, I'll go first since I definitely haven't been around as long as John and Jason have. But I think for me, the one thing that's been super interesting, especially since being on a podcast, is learning about how much Freemasonry has changed in a very short span of time, historically speaking, and how it's been completely transformed from a bunch of just erudite polymath dudes like Elias Ashmole, right? Who started an organization or joined an organization for the very same reasons a lot of us joined, to what it's turned into today, right? Like the one-day class, Blue Lightnings, let's get as many brothers as we can and then stick them over and get them over to the shrine, so that
green
beans and shrine, so it's interesting. It's interesting to think like what somebody like Ashmole or people who were in the Royal Society who were secretly Freemasons, what they would think of the organization today. So many appendant bodies and so many degrees and Masonic week and all these extra things and lapel pins that you wear. And like, is this what they had envisioned over 300 years ago? You know,
we are the Mary Kay for men, are we not? I mean, you're in 5 minutes. You got 7 pins, 3 medals, 5 hats, and a pink Cadillac. So, you know,
I was thinking more Avon.
Well, whatever you prefer,
Yeah,
Jason.
Whatever works.
What about
Amway is Masonic?
Is it corrugated cardboard? So, yeah, I mean, that's. What about you guys? Any sort of mind expanding esoteric ideas that you guys have run across in your show?
So
Jason?
I would say it's very interesting how deeply steeped in Renaissance philosophy in the Western esoteric tradition the Masonic ritual is. Just about every single line was put there for a purpose. And there's a reason why we've been able to do 400 plus episodes on Freemasonry, because it's so jam-packed. It's so syncretic of historical and educational and philosophical traditions. And so the magnitude with which kind of Freemasonry has been influenced by major world events and philosophies is something that continues to delight and kind of bring me joy. And
yeah, I'm going to build on that, because I think back at what were some of my favorite episodes or head scratchers, and they were more in the adjacent arts of philosophy and religion, where I actually pushed myself outside of my boundaries to go study up on a topic real quick before the next week's show, right? And come out learning something, improving myself, and hopefully sharing that, with someone who will listen. And so it's become more of a, dare I say, a ritual or a spiritual practice in itself to apply Masonry to every week, pick a topic that in some ways, some better than others, but helps me become a better person, because I'm pulling into Neoplatonism, I'm pulling into forms, I'm pulling into Christian mysticism. Like, it's just, there's this whole buffet of things that are there to choose from. And once you start finding like, oh, I really like this, I'm going to start going back for a second plate of that. And that's what, again, back to how Masonry is the outer porch. There's just so many layers that you have to dig for it. You can only be shown so much, and that you're only going to be shown what that one person has experienced. Whoever your guru, your mentor, whoever that is to you. And then, man, once you start, picking up the axe and start hacking away, you're going to find things that are going to really challenge your life assumptions, and then hopefully transform you.
It's so funny that you call it the outer porch, because it's like, one of my questions was, so why does it have so many symbols, rituals, teachings that resemble ancient mystery schools? It's almost like, it's like this, I don't want to call it a wasteland or a desert, but it's like littered with the bodies of ancient symbols and knowledge and stuff. And it's like literally everywhere. You just pick it up during the ritual and it's like, well, what's this? What's this? What's that? And it's like, everyone's like, pretend that's not there. Let's go out for bourbon and cigars. Like, it's kind of, I don't know. There's a certain frustration that builds up in me, which is why on some level we're also part of other esoteric organizations, which I will not disclose on this program. But it's you sort of have to go outside it to seek for some stuff that really should be inside it. Am I wrong?
Well, and Jason touched on this really nicely before, where you got to remember when speculative Freemasonry first came out, what was it? It was the beginning of the Enlightenment, and the end of the Renaissance, and the reemergence of the ancient Greek philosophers and things like that, and guys like Isaac Newton. And Freemasonry was molded from that time period all the way to the time of like the Egyptology craze, right? Where people were discovering stuff in ancient Egypt, and that impacted Freemasonry's ritual, the splitting off into so many different appendant bodies, the birth of the Scottish Rite, the birth of the York Rite, that whole thing. It was because people saw things exactly as Jason said that were syncretic to the same lessons that they were trying to teach in the 3 craft degrees, but they wanted to tell more stories, right? So that's how the York Rite expanded, and they got really weird and kind of evangelical at certain points, depending on where you go. And then the Scottish Rite became the University of Freemasonry, and it touches on so many different systems in one short little degree system, right? So,
and then you had the Masonic Tradwife movement with Eastern Star.
Yes,
Tradwife. Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not getting Jessica Franklin on this program today to discuss. I will be seeing her tomorrow, though, down at Ocean Lodge, where I'll be delivering a lecture on quantum entanglement, vibration, and masonry to the applause of no one, I'm sure.
Give Andy our best.
Those are great.
Well, I will.
We'll cheer for you.
Get high.
Yes.
Thank you. And he's a good man.
Yeah,
yes.
Which we do have recorded and actually up on our webpage, or YouTube, I should say.
Nice.
Great lodge.
Yes.
So,
thank you.
From obviously there's, I think we touched on a couple things there, like in terms of the rituals, obviously they're symbolic, but I think, Alex, you were kind of alluding to this. There's kind of a mystical nature to it and a power behind it. And, what I wanted to kind of circle back on, obviously, as we know, Masonry's surrounded with mystery, myths, conspiracies. There's so many things out there, the Illuminati, the New World Order, the conspiracy theories. So in some of the countries where Freemasonry is banned, or even in some of the countries you're alluding to, the royal bloodline and such, does Freemasonry still influence politics and global events at all at this point, in your opinions?
Well, I mean, that kind of got stamped out in Europe after P2. Propaganda do, which is a movement in Italy. Actually, I think it was an anti-Catholic Masonic movement that overtly tried to influence the politics of Rome. I think if we look at the rest of Europe, Freemasonry is not nearly as out in the open as it is in the U.S. And I would imagine that is, propaganda do is one of the reasons for that. But as such, like, you're not getting an overt correlation of Freemasonry to political impacts, at least in Europe. I would say with our membership numbers being the way they are in the U.S., you're probably, you'll see people in government positions who are Freemasons. One of the brothers who who was on my investigation committee was a Capitol Police officer who was a Freemason.
Ooh.
Like, you have Freemasons in the government, but it's not a government of Freemasons, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Now, I will say that in not so much the Middle East or Europe, but definitely in the Latin America area, there is a strong connection between Freemasonry and political persuasion, political power.
The Philippines too. Huge.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That is true. And so I think it's interesting. And I'm just very curious as to why, how did that, what political landscape and, Masonic objectives found those two to be good partners. Like, what happened to make those things, the levers that one pulls to get political favors done. And so, yeah, I find that just be fascinating. Where it didn't happen, from Mexico, if it was still like that in Mexico, why didn't it happen to the neighbor to the north, right, of the United States? Is it because it's a different political history, different political structure? I don't know. It's very strange.
Well, the United States founded on Masonic principles. Is that fair to say?
It is the grand Masonic experiment.
Or it's founded upon Renaissance principles that Masonry adopted.
Okay, fair. I can tell you. So I was in the kitchen making a coffee when Jason was talking about P2, but I did overhear, and I was making coffee in my typical coffee bowl that says "Sleep is for the weak." But what's interesting is I had this conversation at Masonic Week with some of the Romanian guys that show up there, and had a chat with them. The new P2 was founded like about 3 weeks after the death of the old P2. It was called something else and moved into another thing, and it's just as alive and well as it was in the 80s, maybe more so. And in Romania, too, I have to tell you, Masonry is run like a power broker organization. You have to be rich. You have to be influential. It costs a lot of money to... In fact, I even spoke with some of them about, hey, if you wanted to take the rights of Memphis and Mizraim, which are not in any canon that I know of Freemasonry officially, you could do that in Romania. No problem. It would just cost you a lot of money. So it's a very interesting thing that we're talking about. So,
dues are $2 million, but then you're going to learn about how we're all on the level.
I mean, it's worth it
Yes,
if you want
but you
access
get your own
to the
trad wife.
Freemasonry expanded universe.
No, but like to your point, and John was saying earlier, South America, lots of lodges in South America operate the same way. It is very expensive. It's a very long process. You know, that's why, especially in South America and in some parts of Europe, you get, for those of us who are Scottish Rite Masons, every reunion here in the States, you'll see somebody from overseas coming to receive their 32nd degree, because in their country, they'll never receive it in their lifetime. You know what I mean? And it's like, hey, I come here to the United States, I go to a reunion, boom, I'm a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Mason. Where those things are...
It means so much.
Yeah, they just hand them out like candy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
It's crazy.
So just circling back, how did Freemasonry become tied to the Illuminati of the New World Order?
Oh God, that nonsense. Yeah.
So ask our history expert, Jason. Take it away.
Illuminati was kicked off in 1774 or 1776 by Adam Weishaupt in Bavaria, Germany, and he was specifically looking to create a school of wisdom attached to the Jesuit university that he was a professor at. And he had a little bit of trouble getting it off the ground. And so what he did was he appealed to Freemasons. And Weishaupt ended up creating 3 additional Illuminati degrees based on the 3 degrees of Freemasonry, and made it so that you could only get those degrees if you were already a Master Mason. And so there is a tie between Freemasonry and the original Illuminati organization, but the Illuminati organization in Bavaria lasted for 13 years before infighting between Weishaupt and kind of his co-creator, Carnegie. They just kind of broke it apart, and the organization fizzled out. But Freemasonry wasn't tied on purpose to that organization. It was Adam Weishaupt trying to expand the clout of his organization by tying it to Freemasonry.
Well, and I think sorry.
No, please, Joe, go ahead.
I was just going to add, no, Jason's 100% right. And a good friend of I think everybody here, Joe Ages, wrote an amazing book on the history of the Illuminati and how it ties into that. But I think the problem there was the Illuminati, or the Bavarian Illuminati, was very, very publicly anti-political, anti-clergy, and that kind of ruined things for them. And as a result, once they started suppressing secret societies, in that country, a lot of people started to retreat back to Masonry, because Masonry was not hugely openly anti-political and anti-church and stuff like that. If they were, they talked about it within the walls of their lodges, and they didn't let it creep out and make it a political thing. So that's probably where you saw a lot of former Illuminati members just retreat back into the shadows in Masonic lodges.
And it was in 1789 when Proofs of a Conspiracy was published in Europe. and it was essentially a tract or a book that called out secret societies as these invisible movers, and ultimately, it ended up being the aristocracy, and just the aristocracy kind of scapegoating secret societies for the problems that were rampant in revolutionary France and across Europe. And so that's something that led to a suppression of secret societies to include the Bavarian Illuminati in Europe.
And then, of course, later on, even in the United States, we had the Know Nothing Party and the Anti-Masonic Party, all as a reflection of Masonry getting potentially involved in politics. But
which is funny, given that the candidate for the Anti-Masonic Party was a Freemason.
That's awesome.
You can't make that up.
That shows you that we're everywhere. Tentacles upon tentacles.
Nice try, suckers.
Yeah, that's right. We're on both sides. Ha ha. No, but let's give the people what they want, Jay. Jason, if we, so that's where the Weishauptian Illuminati may have fizzled out, but obviously there's people touting themselves as Illuminati today. They're using that term obviously very loosely. Do you know of any particular Illuminati organizations that have bandied about? I know I get one in my mailbox almost 3 times a day from someone who says, just either I'm supposed to pay $1 million or I get $1 million. Either way, if I sign up, I'm not sure. But
Alex, we've been trying to reach you about your car's extended warranty. So if you could, we're trying everything we can to get you to join.
They're always sliding into the DMs.
Pay us $1,000. Here's $1,000. Yeah. So does any one of you guys have a thought on the modern idea? Is it just scams? Is there anything to it? Could there be anything to it?
There was an Illuminati organization that ended up cropping up in South America. I don't think it's still around. Joe Wages was doing some research on it long time ago. I just don't know enough about it to be able to say either way. But I look at the Knights Templar today as an independent body of Freemasonry. Is that the same Knights Templar organization as the original Knights Templar? Of course not.
Absolutely. And Joe Martinez will say so. In fact, it has massive ties to Freemasonry, as we all know. Right, Joe?
I mean, someone has read Born in Blood by John J. Robinson. Awesome.
Illuminati confirmed.
Yeah. But, just because an organization calls itself something doesn't mean that there's a direct causal linkage.
Yeah. Which, again, so let's look at the pop culture impact of that. There's something about at least the Western spirit that wants it to be true, that wants it to continue, that wants it to be this organization behind the shadows. And again, search up Illuminati on YouTube. You're going to find tens of thousands of videos about this organization that we have no evidence that it still exists. But yet Jay-Z will make one little hands gesture during his concert. Beyonce too. Next thing you know, yeah.
This thing?
We had a nice secret society until you ruined it. But here's the thing.
Denied.
So, again, there are tons of secret to semi-secret to private organizations that dabble in really weird but cool stuff. That's ripe for the taking. But no, everyone just focuses on the Illuminati. And frankly, I'm offended. I want some of that, that fame that goes with, being a member of some organization that doesn't exist.
Well, and
that sweet cachet.
Ooh. Yeah. So psychologically too, right? People want to believe that there is someone hidden pulling the strings because it brings order to the chaos of existence. And so it is more preferable, especially for those who buy into conspiracy theories, to say that there's part of a grand master plan that's being enacted and we just don't see it. as opposed to kind of it as opposed to saying, no, this is all chaotic interplay of not necessarily random, but unorchestrated processes based on the world running amok.
So,
and to be frank, Alex, though, if we really were, I know lots of Freemasons. Most of them are pretty awesome dudes and mildly intelligent. Have good head on their shoulders. If we were actually running stuff, we are doing such a shit job of it that I would not claim any ownership of that ever in a million years.
Yeah, and we always joke we can't even organize a pancake breakfast properly, let alone run the world.
No,
that's so true.
But so Trilateral Commission, Bilderbergers, let's throw the Rothschilds in there because everybody likes to. Stuff like that. Certain people love to go down these rabbit holes of these guys run the world on some level or all levels or whatever the case may be. Any ties to Freemasonry there that we know of?
I mean, I'm sure there are members of those groups, things like Bohemian Grove, that are Freemasons. I'm sure there are. Is there direct interplay? You made the joke for me, Dave, right? Like, if one is influencing the other, it's doing a shitty job, So, yeah, I mean, is there, a vast underbelly of world organization going on? Possibly. Do Freemasons have a heavy hand in it? Probably not. You know what I mean? Just because the focus has changed so much. And then, you'll hear people, especially on like social media and stuff. It's like, well, you're not high enough or you haven't been in long enough to know those things. It's like,
exactly.
That's cool and all, but I know the guys that have been in for 60 years and they're no better.
And I wouldn't trust them to, plan dinner.
Pancake breakfast.
Yeah.
No, but there's a conversation to be had. Sorry, Dave. I just want to make this small point.
Yeah.
We keep saying Freemasonry is the outer porch. So, I mean, it's not unfair of these people to say, well, you guys maybe don't know enough. You're not in the inside enough, right? If you could stay all your life, 60 years on the outer porch, having your cigars and bourbon and memorizing your ritual and just emptily going through motions and doing whatever. And as you get deeper into the inner porch, into the house, into the vestibule, into whichever, possibly additional secrets may open to your view. It all depends. So I don't know. It's a question that I think is asked in an honest fashion with the idea of trying to figure out more. But Dave, go ahead.
No, I was just going to make the point that it's interesting because a lot of those Masons that have been Masons for 40, 60 years, whatever it is, they always love to say, well, I've been a Mason for 40 years. You don't understand this. And what I find in most cases is they don't have the background or the knowledge of what Freemasonry truly is. To the point alluded to earlier, it feels like they're just there as a social club. They don't even know why we're doing the ritual or the symbolism, but also just the true meaning behind it. And, I think that's a misconception that it's just like, well, because you're only been in the fraternity for a couple of years, you don't know anything.
So let me ask you guys this, because we have a friend, Dave Palladino, who's a past master of Madison Lodge, Madison 93, just turned in their charter late last year. Very unfortunate. But he ran across Brother Andrew Hammer's book, Observing the Craft, and it changed his view on his Masonic experience. I own that book. I gave it to all of my officers in 2023 when I became master of Congdon Overlook, because look, it's, whatever you may think of traditional observance masonry and so on, I think you make some pretty valid points about how to show up not only for yourself, but for your brethren. So have you guys come across any, let's call it either out there or hidden or lesser known Masonic texts that have sort of changed your view on how you see the craft?
Yes.
Yeah. Let's go. Book club time.
Yeah. I mean, I will absolutely say the first book I read, and I read I read, Observing the Craft and stuff like that. And I think at the time it was written, it was very direct, right? It's like, you got to do these 7 things and you can't do any of the other things. And now as time goes on, some of those opinions have softened, but it's still a good, I recommend that text as well. I think, the Fraternal Review, that was like one of their top 10 Masonic books of all time. Right. And I don't disagree with that, but I absolutely know what changed my view of Freemasonry. It went to Barnes and Noble. Borders bookstore. If y'all can remember Borders. Yes.
Yes.
I went into the weird occult section and I found a book called How to Understand Your Bible by Manly P. Hall. And I was like, who this dude? And I read the book from cover to cover in one sitting. And then I read it again. And I'm like, holy shit, this dude is a Freemason and he gets stuff. So I started just devouring everything I could. That was written by Manly P. Hall. He was one of my favorite Masonic authors. A lot of Masons don't like Brother Manly P. Hall. And he definitely, but
why do you think that is? That's a great question.
Well, because he talks about things that most Masons today would say are not Masonic, but you got to remember who he was. He lived in the time of the Great Illumination, right? Like he was a contemporary with people like Blavatsky and stuff like that. And
spiritualism movement.
What was the spiritualism movement? It was a response. All those organizations started because Freemasonry sucked at the time, and that's how you got your.
Does it not suck now?
But I wasn't going there. But my point being is, you had a dude who traveled the world, studied the mysteries, wrote about them, became a Mason way later in life, and then started to put it all together.
After he had written a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. And he wasn't that far off in his earlier writings, Secret Teachings and Initiates of the Flame. I mean, if you read that as a Mason, you're like, holy shit, this makes sense. I dig it. I love it. I want more of it. But I think. No, they said I could say whatever I want.
We'll fix it in post.
No, you can say whatever you want at this point.
I get
it's just we don't do it in the first 10 minutes because then the algorithm picks it up. But
yeah,
demonetized.
But who's running the algorithm?
Yes.
The Illuminati.
The Masons.
The Illuminati's running the algorithm. Clearly not the Masons because we haven't moved up in it. But now it's funny because
we suck on YouTube.
Yeah, it's like. The Secret Teachings of All Ages is actually on the CIA.gov website. If you just search for it.
Do you know why?
Why?
Because it was found in Osama bin Laden's home. When they actually Capster took him down, that was one of the many texts and media that he had on his compound.
Interesting.
Coincidence? I think not.
I think not.
See, another book. 2 came to mind right off the top of my head. Kirk McNulty, The Way of the Craftsman, a search for the spiritual essence of craft Freemasonry. And
that was going to be one of mine.
Sorry. Then I will not give your second one away. The Meaning of Masonry by Wilmshurst. So those are 2 that I think a good. You're a good Mason. You kind of know your way around. You kind of know where things are. Those are good books to kind of like crack your skull open a little bit and say, I never thought about that way before. That's not in the ritual. Those aren't the exact words that are on the page or how it was taught to me or as I'm hearing it in Lodge. But now that you kind of tell me to look at it from this angle, and now as I'm watching the officers open Lodge, it's like, holy smokes, this is a theurgic ritual that we're purging demons out of the lodge room as we open Lodge. But you couldn't tell that by half the guys sleeping on the wall. So, yeah.
To your point, Wilmshurst was another one. He wrote in the 1920s during the height, was it the second largest height in membership that Freemasonry ever had? And he was just crying and complaining about the same thing. Dude sleeping. Nobody comes to Lodge. Nobody gets it. It's a social club. We're going out to dinner every night. Blah, blah, blah. Just crying and complaining about the very same things that we are now. We're just suffering in membership as well. So, but that's where, and I'll state it again, that's where a lot of these people in the early 20th century left Freemasonry to go do other things because they got tired of the social club atmosphere, the age of fraternalism, right? The dinner club.
Yeah, I think you're seeing that today as well. we are all part of other bodies and orders. Would we be a part of those still if we had found that in Freemasonry? Maybe.
Well, so
Maybe not.
let's segue into that a little bit, right? So I was going to say one of the books that I liked very much was, I think it's called "What It Means to Be a Master Mason" by Gerard Ancas, otherwise known as Papus or Papus. It's a very thin book. It's a page turner. So a very, very interesting thing. But and again, we're not going to discuss what we're a part of in terms of other esoteric things. It's just not appropriate. And, there's a bunch of reasons. But
what a Master Mason ought to know.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one.
Oh, that's
so,
the one.
But
nobody had Freemasonry for Dummies on their list. Go figure.
HODAP, the old HODAP. But let's talk about stuff. So, if you can't get or you don't get what you want out of Masonry, where do you go? There's other non-Masonic organizations. There's Golden Dawn. There's Rosicrucians. There's Martinism. There's other Templar organizations that have all kinds of other possibilities, like over 500 Templar organizations. There's
chivalric orders,
other fraternal orders that are not Templar. Yeah, chivalric orders, exactly. So, I'm part of this thing, which is like SMOTJ, the Sovereign Military Order of the Temple of Jerusalem, which is Christian. Basically, you got to be Christian, Trinitarian to be a part of it, and it's basically just an order that gives to charity. Pretending or purporting to be another Templar order. So, what are your guys' thoughts on that in terms of what do these other things offer that Freemasonry maybe doesn't?
Well, so John, Joe, and I are all in the SRICF, the Rosicrucian Order.
The best dependent body to Freemasonry, in our opinions.
Yeah,
is it?
And
in Jersey, it's relegated to a sort of a dinner club, unfortunately, from what I understand, and it's full. So maybe that's just my bitter grapes for not being a part of it. But
well, there's a wave of change coming though, man. And I know when I joined, when I was invited, John was already a member, and that was the first thing. When I told him I got invited, it was the same college. Virginia only has one college.
Pure nepotism.
And yeah, absolutely. But I mean, and he warned me. He was like, "Hey, man, when I first got here, this place was a Grandmaster's Lunch Club, and they didn't do anything, and meetings were boring, and they had lunch, and you drove 4 hours, and you didn't get much out of it. But it's changing. So you had brothers that were actively seeking to turn it around into what it was meant to be. And I'll just tell a story. I'm not going to name names, but we were all there. And I think it was, so our college, at least in the time I've been there, they're heavy on education, right? So we meet 4 times a year. 1 month is for election and installation. So it's a business meeting and bringing in new members. The other 3 meetings supposed to be all papers. That's it. No business. You're just doing education. And that's it. And we super love that.
Yes.
We got in a car. I think all of us went together, drove about 3 hours. I think I presented and John presented and somebody else presented. And we were talking about things like fractals, and we were talking about the Kabbalah and some other thing. And we had a brother there who was a past Grand Master of Virginia. He had just celebrated his 50 years in SRICF, right? John?
50 years in an independent body, not a 50-year Mason.
Yeah, 50-year member of SRICF. And he gets up and he says, with a straight face, he says, I've been in this organization for 50 years and I've never heard some of this stuff. And the 3 of us, we snapped our heads around. We're like, are you kidding me? Have you cracked open the ritual book? Because all these things were like on the first 4 pages.
Ever in the past 49 years.
Yeah.
You couldn't have tripped over this.
That's what I'm saying.
It's scary
With the bones of esoteric stuff.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, pretend it's not there, guys. Pass me the bourbon. Yeah. It's a tough one. I don't know. Talk more about this Rosicrucianism of yours.
Yeah. Well, and so even because sadly it is an invite only body, and because it's regaled to past Grandmaster Supper clubs in many jurisdictions, not all, but again, we're trying to be the change, as Joe says, and trying to fix it from the inside. But that aside, like let's just say let's find an independent body to Masonry that's a little bit more accessible. Scottish Rite. If you weren't invited anything
Like
else inside of
Arch Knight Templar priest,
the structure of Masonry.
Yes.
Oh yeah, we haven't even gone down the York Rite Knight Mason side there, but
Now, are you talking Southern jurisdiction or Northern Masonic jurisdiction?
Closest to Albert Pike as you can get.
The one that
these are Jersey boys.
The one that doesn't have
would be...
astronauts and cowboys in their rituals.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey,
not that.
hey,
degrees that are not recorded. Yes. Yeah.
Dude,
so
time out.
No.
Time out.
No.
Pull the bus over to the side of the pretentious turnpike, okay? Because you go to
turn this
Guthrie.
car around.
You go to Guthrie, and I know this from my buddy Randy Sanders. They freaking record all of those degrees that you're watching the degrees for, like, oh, we do all 33 degrees, blah, 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 blah.
But they don't have an astronaut degree in Guthrie, do they? No.
No. Are you talking?
Right.
How dare you, sir?
Mystical order of AI. Yes.
Yeah. No, we have Brothers of the Trail, which is like, which is that, the 18th?
Oh,
No, it's got to be the 16th degree, 15th degree, something like that. Anyway, I don't know. Oh, by the way, I need to desperately memorize the Feast of the Paschal Lamb in like the next 11 days. How do I do that? Because it's I got that order part, and it's a bear. It is a bear to memorize.
But look, you in the southern,
it to your thigh.
Just for the thigh, my inner thigh.
If you pick up a copy of the annotated Morals and Dogma, follow the Scottish Rite, the Southern Masonic jurisdiction, you're going to find some cool stuff, because when Albert Pike was revising the pre-existing Scottish Rite ritual, Albert Pike stole lots of good things. You talk about syncretic system. There was no copyright law back then. Albert Pike was stealing huge chunks.
Acquired.
He
learned from Agrippa.
Yes. You made this? I made this. He took that. It took things like, and again,
now is that the De Hoyos version, or is that actually by Albert
That is
Pike?
the De Hoyos. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. The De Hoyos annotated version, which is extremely helpful, right? Because if you were to read pure Pike, you'd fall asleep in 2 chapters. But the point I was getting to is that, like, Eliphas Levi wrote a really good, like, starter pack for esoterics, which is Transcendental Magic, or the Mysteries of High Grade Magic, if you try to search for it.
That's a starter pack?
And that's magic with a K, right?
It's easy to read.
With a CK.
Not hard to grasp.
Well,
I will say it doesn't try to, it doesn't make it complex. It just makes it dense, if that makes sense. So it's not a page turner. You've got to like walk through it, but it's plain English, right? It's accessible in that way, at least to me. I don't know. If you want to call me smart, that's on you. But there were
I'm not saying smart, but
I hate you guys. So you pick up Pike literally just appropriated huge swaths of Eliphas Levi and stuck it right into the Scottish Rite degree, stuck it into Morals and Dogma. And so, again, if I'm a new Mason, I want something accessible, and I want to go down some rabbit holes. Like, there are so many off ramps to the Southern Masonic jurisdiction of Scottish Rite that you could spend many, many years looking at the philosophies, the mystery schools that are alluded to within there, right? So it's a place to go to start, as far as we're talking to like the outer porch and like, where do you find the next step?
So, Alex, by the way, Brother of the Veil is the 4th degree, which if you watch Thursday Night at the Rite in the Northern jurisdiction, they play like every friggin' week. It's just like, all right.
Video degrees, baby.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. What can I tell you? It is what it is. I mean, I think it's doing the degree work where a lot of I don't know. Do you guys consider doing degree work transformational?
Doing good ritual should be transformational.
With intent.
Initiatic rituals.
It should be. If done well and approached the right way by both the ritual providers as well as the candidate.
Now, as we know, there are certain parts of Freemasonry that are very esoteric, and they're very tied to their fog machines or smoke machines. Do you feel like setting up that sort of egregore in the room is necessary for a transcendental experience?
Well, foundationally, everything you do in Freemasonry is done within a sacred space.
Mm-hmm.
Like opening of the lodge, you are making that a sacred space. And so if you approach it that way, like I'm good with a little bit of thespianism and trying to make it come alive for the candidate. Now you can trip and fall into campy, which I think
sure can.
Has great diminishing returns. But ultimately, like you are a guide to this candidate on what could be the most transformational experience of their life.
So in Virginia, are you guys doing one candidate at a time during degrees, or do you have multiple candidates?
It depends on the lodge and the year and who's Grandmaster. No, so
depends on the degree.
Yep. So
gotta put butts in seats, boys. Butts in seats.
Yeah, no. But no, I was just gonna add to Jason's comment. I think a couple of these times we've actually been there together, where I've been to a tiny little country lodge with wood paneling on the sides, and I've seen a brother, conduct a candidate around and do the ritual. And I've seen some of the most beautiful lectures I've ever seen. Like, I was like, holy crap, that had intent and it had meaning, and the guy got it. Transpose that into, I've been in the District of Columbia, some of the most beautiful lodges in the country, Naval Lodge with like all the Egyptian stuff in it, and then not naming them, but I've been to lodges in DC that are super professional, black tie, and I've seen some of the crappiest degrees I've ever seen. Like, they just rushed the guy through, stumbled through ritual, or it sounded like they were reading from a book and it had no meaning to it. And I walked out and I'm like, I feel so bad for that candidate. They got a terrible experience. And it kind of ruins it, right? Like, and John talks about it all the time. It's like one bad experience will ruin your Masonic career.
And
so would you say
bring 20 guys in at the same time, right?
Oh,
that's another thing.
So would you say
I'm still
good,
talking?
And then
we don't care.
Would you say that good Masonic work requires energy work?
I'll ask the questions around here.
Hey,
sorry.
Energy expense.
Ignore Alex. Let's take over. I would say, and Jason alluded to it more than once. If you
alluded to your mom,
yeah, she's coming to get that, buddy. Can't afford her.
She's very nice.
She is. She's lovely. If you open a lodge with intent and meaning and purpose, that in and of itself will build the egregore of a room. If you got guys that are sleeping and opening candy wrappers and looking at their phones and all that other crap, yeah, you're gonna have a crappy experience, and there's no spirituality within the four walls of that lodge.
I'm sorry, Joe. What was that word you said? Egregore? What is that? What was that word?
You said it first.
That would be egregore, Alex.
Yeah. Egregore.
Yes.
Egregore.
The price of egregores nowadays, it's through the roof. Inflation.
Paris, baby. Paris on egregores.
Egregorian
Paris
flu.
on egregore.
Yes.
Egregorian chants.
Some people say that we have egregore. I think we have the best egregore. I don't know. But anyway, what is egregore? Huge. You're fired.
Egregore is a shared collective spiritual energy that happens in sacred spaces when like-minded people come together to do good work.
That could describe right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not limited to Masonry or esoteric orders. It could be done
in your room,
at a funeral, in your room. Yeah.
Could be done in your room.
But it's better with a
Things
friend.
are done in my room.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
The
Joe.
more
You were
the
saying.
merrier.
Okay.
I don't know
That's
what the hell
another
I
way
was
to go
saying.
about it.
Move on.
And we did have Mark Stavish on, who wrote Egregores, the occult entities that watch over humans, or whatever it's called. Something along
And you could
those
use
lines.
certain things to improve your egregore experience, I suppose.
Maybe egregores are just communal thought forms.
Which is always nice.
Okay, so because one thing I was thinking too, one of your earlier questions, which might be related to this, is so if egregores are shared spiritual energy, then where does manifestation fit into all this?
Ooh, okay.
Spiritual
So
enemy applied in a specific direction. Sorry, Alex, go ahead.
no. That's fantastic. Spiritual energy applied in the spirit. So the intent has to be there in order to function the manifest.
100%.
So okay, guys, this is so good. Let's break this down in a way that dumbasses like myself could actually try to understand this, because I go off and peddle, and I do peddle these my wares in terms of vibration, masonry. I'm doing it tomorrow night. And yet when I'm asked in terms of the nuts and bolts of it all, it's like I'm still coming up somewhat confused on, because let's talk about, I mean, metaphysics is a tough nut to crack. It's hard to grasp. It's kind of like you try to pin it down to like, all right, let's create a formula it's going to work. It's going to make sense. A is right, and then underpants, and then rule the world. And so how do we get to a proper understanding of what is manifestation? What is it? How do we get there? How do we use it? How do we go about this tool?
Well, I think it goes back to, I think Jason said it beautifully, right? So I'm not gonna add or Albert Pike him.
You seem so surprised.
I know I am. You surprise me occasionally, but I mean, just his definition of egregore leads you directly to manifestation, right? He already said it's that collective spiritual consciousness, right? It's kind of hard to do alone, right? You need a friend or a bunch of friends to do it. And I can absolutely tell you the first time I experienced a group egregore was not in a Masonic lodge. It was in one of the other organizations that we know of. And it was my first group meeting. And I walked out an absolutely changed human being.
Everybody remembers their first egregore.
Absolutely. And then I went and got a shot.
That's what she said.
But no, I think it's more than just, okay, we have to follow these steps in order to do this. I think it really depends on the people that are in that room. Number one, they have to be open to things, right? They have to be open to an experience. You can't just be the best ritualist and say, oh, I'm going to get egregore today because I know all the words and I can do this and I can hold my hands a certain way. It's not perfunctory ritual. It's coming in with an intent to be open to things and also to influence those around you as well, right? So it's a two-way sharing. But I think once you do that, you don't have to know all the right words, and you just have to follow along with the rest. And being open to things will give you the opportunities to experience that collective consciousness, I think.
I was going to go even further down the building blocks and say, so pure manifestation, right? That can be done by one person, right? If you direct your energy towards something, the universe will align for that thing or some aspect of that thing to occur, to happen, to change. I'm a firm believer of that. Like, whether it is ceremonial magic that makes it happen, or whether it's just, hey, I'm changing my mindset. I'm really going to go after this thing. I'm going to stop doing things that aren't productive and start doing things that are productive.
Whatever
that is, that manifestation does happen, because that's where I was going from the beginning. Alex, you beat me down with this wet noodle, and finally you manifested this episode, which is great, right? And I think it's amazing for you. So if one person can manifest, then is a well-formed egregore, right, a harmony of manifestations. Because I think this really ties the episode together, because we talked about how Masonry really jives for some people, and some people just see it as a fraternal group or a social club. And why? It's the same Freemasonry. And yet some people are going to resonate at a higher level to what they hear, what they see, how they experience the ritual, the intent. And so I'm just wondering if how do you, and we all know you do things that are more traditional observance. You do things with intent. You do things like you said, it could be, it doesn't have to be an expensive lodge. You could do it in an old country, wood panel lodge. If all of the brethren are intent aligned, focused, you're going to have a great degree. You're going to have a great experience, and you're going to transform people's lives. Yeah. So I think that's where egregore really fits in there. Jason?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, rhetorically, have you ever been in a degree where it was just on, like you get the hair standing up on the back of your neck? It's just
that's so great.
Good.
It's great that we've all seen that. Yeah.
That is an egregore manifesting a candidate. And
yes.
I think of egregore as, you can manifest through energy. God spoke the world into existence through vibration. If you take that vibrational energy concept of creation, that
I wish Skatone was here. He loves geeking out about this stuff.
If you take that vibrational concept of creation and apply it to personal manifestation, right? Yeah, you can, cause that creation to occur. If you get an egregore together, you're dialing the amplitude of that wave way up.
Right. It's harmony. It's synchronizing the waves, right? Because you don't want waves offset, right? And again, back to like what times where it doesn't work. Just sorry to cut you off, but I love it because I'm jumping in on this metaphor because it's a really good way to describe it. If you mix a sine wave with a cosine wave, you get flatness. It cancels out, right? So you need to, or at least if the waves are offset. And that's where when a brother's having a really crappy day, like it's really hard. You could feel the energy drag down, in a lodge meeting sometimes because of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the closer you get to aligning, that's why I use the word harmony on purpose. Right. Once you start aligning frequencies, they don't have to be the same frequency, but they can produce harmony. Then to Jason's point, right, you get the sound, the intent right, and now you magnify it. And now you increase that amplitude of the wave. And that's where the real magic happens.
See, that's interesting because I've always contemplated Freemasonry as an egregore in itself. But how did we derail from the original intent so much from that? Because you would think the collective egregore still had that traditional observance and all the different traditions within it. And then all of a sudden it became a social club, right?
No, well, it didn't happen overnight. Oh, sorry. I was going to say it didn't happen overnight, right?
Right.
And that's something that, you mentioned observing the craft again. Everything that's in that book basically says it when it boils down to, the Reader's Digest version is do things with intent, dress with intent, come to lodge with intent, do ritual with intent. That's essentially what Andrew Hammer's saying, right? In a much longer way. But I think as we started to grow in numbers and we started to care more about numbers than the actual people we were letting in at whatever period of time that was, that's when we started to have this rift of, okay, now some guys are joining because it's a social club. Some guys are joining because they want to be charitable. Some guys are joining because they want to learn more about themselves and their place in the universe, right? So once you started having a divergence, I'm sorry to say, a divergence of why people are joining, that's where the rift began.
Right. That makes sense. And Andrew Hammer actually came up to speak at Essex Lodge. What was that? 2 years ago now? Whatever it was. But
2023.
When he came up, one thing I thought was really fascinating that he said was a lot of these lodges, the intention back in 1717 and such, most lodges lasted maybe 20 years at most. And they had probably like 10 to 15 members, met in taverns, things of that nature. So maybe that's part of the problem that, obviously we have extensive history and some of these lodges are a couple 100 years old, maybe it's just we diverge so much because of that.
Well, and to like, it's not just that Masonry is kind of diverged. Like I have been to lodges practicing traditional observance where the egregore has not been pronounced or has been all sorts of jacked up. And so whereas, I have experienced that, hair raising, like amazing, ritualistic egregore in my own mother lodge, which is just about as country of a lodge as you can get. And so, if you approach Masonry for the transformational nature of it, then that I think is a fertile ground for an egregore to grow and thrive. I think it's just getting brethren to think of it more than just, a supper club where we do, we do these fun plays that, we just kind of have to do to get more members.
So essentially every lodge then becomes its own egregore, even though there's the egregore of Freemasonry. It sounds like what you're deducing is within each lodge, there's also, a microcosm and an egregore there.
Yeah, I don't think Freemasonry itself has an egregore. Does it have a roadmap to create that experience for its brothers? Yes, it does. That's the ritual.
What about the mystic tie?
How about I just finish my sentence before you start jibber jabber in your face?
Hey.
Children.
Yes. Yeah, I lost my train of thought.
We need to get the moderator involved.
Sorry, Joe. Please continue.
I don't know. Whatever John said, it's great.
What you're saying there's no universal egregore to Freemasonry, right? And it's definitely much more strengthened in the local lodge level. And so that's my counterpoint to you was then what do you call like Brothers of the Mystic Tie, where, you can meet a brother on the other side of the world and you instantly have this connection with them that you can't describe. It's ineffable, but you know that there's something through a shared experience and a shared set of basic common values
and immovable landmarks.
It's effable. It's not ineffable. Like, you're talking about shared experience.
You're
right?
effable.
Your face is effable.
He's very effable.
You're talking about, I really liked what you said, but I disagree because you have shared experience, right? So, it's the same thing as like, I served in the Army. I could be at Walmart and I see some other dude with an Army shirt and we fucking slap and do all this stuff and do the Arnold Schwarzenegger and Carl Weathers, power slam. Yes. There's a kinship there and there's a shared experience, but would I call it a spiritual consciousness that ties us both together? No. Now I will say it's a bit different for. Oh, go ahead. No, you were going to say
you actually bring up a very interesting point, because if you take Stavish's example of egregores, what he talks about, then not only is there an egregore to every organization. So if you recognize another Army guy, a foxhole buddy, if you will, then the egregore of the Army is the one that kicks in, as opposed to and also egregores fight against each other. If you go to an Army-Navy game, you see that pretty clearly in terms of there's certain things like us in the Knights of Columbus, if we weren't both dysfunctional, it's like two quadriplegics trying to go at it. It's
wow, but you just went there.
I went there. Absolutely.
No, you did. No, like I said, I think for me, I kind of hold the term and the concept of egregore to a higher standard, right? It's coming at something with intent and the knowledge that you're there to raise your consciousness, right?
Well, if you step into St. Patrick's Cathedral, right, you step off Park Avenue into St. Patrick's Cathedral, immediately you get slapped in the face with the egregore of Catholicism. Well, is it the egregore of St. Patrick's or is the egregore of Catholicism? which on some level. So in other words, if you're in Jason's rural lodge, and your hair stands up on end because of what's happening in that lodge, is that the egregore of Freemasonry, or is it the egregore specifically of Jason's lodge?
So we've solved it, because your original question is the Illuminati, Bavarian Grove, are they related to Freemasonry? Absolutely, because I'm sure there's some Mason that was in there who brought the egregore of Freemasonry into those other organizations.
St. Patrick's Cathedral, he's sitting there, he's hiding, and he just blasts you with some egregore.
It's like that one dude.
He's under the pew.
Light a candle, leave a dot.
A little too much holy water.
Yes.
Ah.
Well, the egregores don't necessarily have to persist, and you can flow in and out of them, right? And so if Joe, goes and visits another lodge where there's a strong egregore, like for the time that those brethren are together, he is contributing to and feeding off of that egregore. And when the brethren go away.
You ever been to Sedona, Arizona? Anybody?
I have not.
Yes, I have.
So if you go to Sedona and you go to, that is home to several vortices, which emit power of various kinds, yin energy, yang energy, and so on. There's a specific one called Bell Rock. Bell Rock exists in Sedona. It's a huge yang energy vortex, I should say. If you go there, I mean, for me, I did a lot of Tai Chi. I'm energy sensitive. I can sense this kind of stuff. I think we all are to some extent. If we're sensing the things that are happening in the lodges and so on, then, you get affected by this. And I got affected profoundly to the point where it was hard to walk. Like different things happen. And then at the same time, there was a couple that was walking by talking about what they were going to have for lunch as if they were just strolling anywhere, like completely unaffected by everything that was going on in terms of this vortex and the power that it was putting out. And
different frequencies.
Intent, man. Well, what was the intent of being there?
So then this is what we're kind of talking about, right? So if I go into Jason's lodge, I'm already part of the egregore of Freemasonry. So if somebody else is sitting next to me who's a brand new brother, or somebody who's just checking out the lodge at an installation, and we are all getting whatever we're getting, and this guy's sitting over there and he's just like, geez, my nose bugging me, and he's picking it. Then it's, then is it then a matter of what? Intent, having already been exposed to the Gestalt, which then primes you for the experience later on? Is that what's happening? I mean, it's just, I'm trying to nail it down, because it's frustrating to me that I can't explain this in a way that other people can understand. I mean, you start seeing it with martial arts, right? You have the empty force, and some people get super affected by it. Some people, it just doesn't hit whatsoever. Or David Hawkins's idea of kinesthesiology, where, some people can be, it can work on, and some people it just doesn't work on. The different bodies, different energy levels, different frequencies, as John would say. So I don't know. Thoughts on that? I know it's a convoluted topic, but.
Is it meant to be explained, or is it meant to be experienced?
Okay. Anybody else doesn't have a cop-out answer?
No, I think, like I said, I think you touched on something.
I'm just messing with you. Oh, man.
You touched on something really interesting, right? So there is a difference. There is a difference between egregore and your example of site energy, right?
Right.
Egregore is, like Jason said, it was the best description I've ever heard. It is the collective thought form of a group, right? It's not tied to a building. You can take those same people and put them out in the parking lot and experience that same energy if you're doing the same things. Site energy is based on things like physical, environmental, historical factors, right? So it's tied to a specific site, like the Parthenon, like the pyramids of Egypt, you know what I mean? Stonehenge, so you don't need people at all to experience a transformational change there, right? Or like you were talking about, kind of like being an antenna, being able to receive those signals, right? Egregore shapes the minds of those who engage in that practice. So, going back to Jason's lodge experience, right? there could be 10 dudes there. 9 of you could be experiencing the collective egregore of the group, and one dude is sitting there unwrapping a loud piece of candy and on his phone, and he's not experiencing shit, right? So just because he's there does not mean he's part of the egregore. Absolutely not. So egregore, I think the big difference between the two things you talk about, egregore is active, right? You are there with intent, doing something to raise the collective thought form of the group.
Ooh, okay.
Physical sight energy stuff, it's passive. It's like, oh, I'm here and now I'm experiencing something. Holy crap. So I think that, like I said, there's a big difference between the two, but egregore has to be with a group of people who are there to do a thing with intent.
So
Like
Jason
versus passive.
That haunted hotel over by Ocean Lodge.
Yeah, been there.
Oh, I haven't been there. But Jason, by the way, I want to apologize. I was flippant with your answer, and it didn't deserve that. I was just joking. But I was just
You're fine.
I was just trying to. My own ego needs to be able to explain this, and I know that it's probably a gestalt, and I know that that's probably what it is, and part of it is putting your ego away and allowing the experience to unfold. But then how do you describe it? How do you help others? I mean, they would have to then sit in the well with you and experience that gestalt.
Yeah,
otherwise,
Yes.
And that's what I think. Yeah, I like the idea what Joe was saying with nine active and then one opening the wrapper, because I'm wondering, I was under the assumption, right, that it is an active participation thing, but yet it could be passive. Like, to your point, when you're in these vortexes, like it's happening to you, right? You're experiencing it. Maybe you weren't intending to, but you're feeling it, right?
Right.
We can all think of experiences we've had in our life where things happened to us and we weren't prepared, and we had some sort of changed experience because of that. And so I think, there's a duality there of active egregore versus passive egregore. And I think you do eventually transition into not just receiving, but then giving as well.
it's a beautiful thing.
So then you could actually argue that the lodge room and certain places there's that site energy. So that could take on its own egregore. And then could that, I know you're saying it's passive, could it actually influence the group at all?
If done properly. Yeah, absolutely.
And I definitely need to get the details on that Ocean Lodge.
Hotel? Yeah, we go do a.
Yeah, I've stayed there. Y'all have stayed there.
So if you, many traditions have a great work, right? So we know this from certain esoteric practices and other such. What is Freemasonry's great work, if there is? Is it to extend that egregore out so that others can experience the benefits of it? No. What do you think it is, Joe?
I think the great work of Freemasonry is to teach you the moral lesson of how to die. And then once you learn that lesson, to do whatever the hell you want to do with it for the rest of your life.
I could see that. I would add to that by saying that it also overemphasizes before that the purpose of being a social society, of how we are supposed to take care of others while we're here, right? So not just how we die, but also while we're here, what are we charged to do, right? So I think there's some great work there that is part of what we are charged to do, or we're obligated to do, that makes it more of a commitment, a little more skin in the game than just other organizations.
So would anybody... Oh, sorry, Jason, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Dave. I think there's also an aspect of sanctification there. And, this gets back to, we live in an imperfect world. But we believe in a perfect creator. A dogmatic assumption that Freemasonry makes. And so through the aim of taking men and making them better, that is a sanctifying process that you not only undergo, but you guide your fellow brethren, and by extension, widows, orphans, and all people you interact with on that journey of growing closer to between creation and creator.
Wow.
So I was actually going to ask if, do you feel that there's a correlation with shadow work? Because obviously with,
Yes. Oh my gosh. Get out of my head. This is great.
well, joining the egregore.
Yeah. So not
so true.
unlike how you have to remove the impurities of base metals before you can perform alchemy. Not unlike how you have to break off the corners of
rough stones,
the rough stones
for the builder's use.
Yeah. So I think a certain amount of shadow work is, I'm not even going to say required. Well, I'm not going to go that far yet, but it's certainly a catalyst to help shape yourself to be ready to contribute to an active egregore.
Ooh.
Right? Because you need to remove your own impurities. You need to remove your faults. You need to find out what triggers you. You need to explore some of those things in a productive way, not in a self-deprecating, self-hating way. But it doesn't hurt every now and then. I got a list on my other screen here of shadow work questions. I was just talking about this with one of my mentees the past week, that every once in a while, if you do it with intent to improve yourself, it's a great tool to help you just kind of get rid of those things that they may have been blind spots to you in the past. So yes, I agree. I like it. Good call.
Can I ask I'm just gonna, it's my show and all.
No.
I do think there's
all right, it's your show too. Yeah, go ahead. No. Let's finish the shadow work thing. Although this is important.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure Jason was going to say something, and then you rudely cut him off. No, okay.
You're 2 for 2, Alex. You're 2 for 2.
Yep.
2 for 2.
Go for it.
The Ken show. Does anybody know what that is? If I say Ken show, if I say Nirvana, if I say something of that kind, yes.
The band.
No,
the
not Kurt Cobain's thing. No. Get your whole head in front of the shotgun. No.
Thank you for calling.
Great painter.
It's a great painter. There's a guy I pay attention to online called Angelo DeLulo. He wrote a book called Awake. He has a YouTube channel called Simply Always Awake. Very interesting stuff. He's experienced Kensho, which is the first on the first step on the path to enlightenment, or liberation at least. It's the first. It really is kind of the start of liberation. Your brain turns off. You have a breakthrough of the ego experience. Your brain stops monkey minding. It stops, at least for anywhere from a week to a year, and then it comes back, but it's never the same after that. You have a different experience with your monkey mind after that time. And that starts you on the path to then doing shadow work, because what ends up happening is all of the static and everything goes away, and then life is right here. And there's no way to avoid the shadow at that point, because it's right literally in your face. You can't ignore it anymore. So then you have to do the shadow work if you want to continue breathing and living and not going insane. So let me ask you guys, have you had that experience? And if you haven't, do you, like me, feel like an imposter by talking about a lot of the stuff because we haven't actually gone and done the thing?
Well, I think to your point, I can only speak for myself. You know, and going back to my simplistic comment about what the ultimate, aim of Freemasonry is learning how to die. But going on to your Kensho comment, when I say learning how to die, it's shedding that ego, right? And putting that ego completely aside, and hopefully at the other end of that degree or that lifelong journey, you become a different person, right? Because the ego is now dead, right? And that's the moral lesson that we teach. But to your point, when you talk about like Kensho, in which I'm pretty sure is specifically Zen Buddhism, right? Whereas Nirvana is traditional Buddhism. That is, I think, how you described it. It's a punch in the face. It's like, okay, ego is dead today, and I'm taking an active step to never confront it again. And to your point, I think it does fit nicely into shadow work because, I think when we were talking about shadow work and Freemasonry, it does dovetail nicely because you've now cast those things aside that are wasteful and not useful parts of your life in order to move forward as a spiritual being, right? And shadow work, one of the parts of shadow work is confronting that and getting rid of it so that you can work on those truer paths of enlightenment, I guess you could say.
Wow.
But I guess it's not the end all be all. I'm sure it's not the only way, right? Each of us all find our own way towards quote unquote enlightenment. There's many different paths that lead to the top of the same mountain.
Very well said.
There are many different levels,
but we're all on the level.
Yes, that's why there are so many of them.
John, any thoughts on that?
So it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. Like, I think most of us would agree that there's many paths to the top of the mountain, right? And so what one like Eastern framework would call it, I think there's a corresponding method in other traditions. And so when you were talking about that, one thing that I was thinking of when you talked about that is like going up the 10th Sphero in the Kabbalistic tree of life, that they are veiled on purpose, and that you have to make progress in order to ascend to the next level.
Okay.
And you can be stuck on some of those spheros for the rest of your life, right? You have to make an active attempt to remove
multiple
something
lifetimes
to face. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. In order to break free from that. And so, just in some of my practices, it's been something that it's a framework that I found to be helpful to think about. Well, what do I need to do to face these realities? And some of them, I mean, frankly, so what one experience I'm thinking of in particular was upon meditation, right? That in order to move to the next level on the tree of life, I realized that I would have to be purely altruistic, and in the sense of like being as charitable as I possibly can without material injury to myself. And I mean, like, as give it all away, like, sell your boats and nets and follow me. Like, okay, I'm not ready for that yet. I've got like a mortgage. I've got like 5 kids. I'm not willing to make that sacrifice just yet. But I know what
was
the next step
Lazarus,
is.
right? Or who was it that was the rich guy that had a tough time with when Jesus asked him that? He said, "So
yeah, exactly, yeah."
Yourself. But you bring up
no, I can't do that.
Mm-hmm. You bring up a wonderful point of, and I only say this because I just did a Vipassana meditation retreat for 10 days where I couldn't talk for 10 days. So that's why I'm talking extra now. But it's one of the things where it's based on 3 principles: the idea of moral behavior, mastering the mind, which we've talked about already. Jason's talked about it in terms of the stuff to read, the stuff to know. But it's all, it can be very heady. Freemasonry, a lot of these esoteric things. So where's the gestalt outside of the practicing of the ritual? You mentioned meditation, right? How do you actually, where do you sit in the thing that is the transformative crucible? So, because you're not going to get there by reading books, right? You can read books about swimming all day, but you're not going to swim until you're in the water and you're feeling the feeling and doing the thing. So if you could each weigh in on that, I'd appreciate it.
It's in the degree and the mentorship that goes along with it.
Okay, so that mystic tie again that you're talking about.
Yeah, I would say it's, and I probably said it 10 times previously. It's whatever it is you're doing in Freemasonry, do it with the intent of purpose of why you're there, right? Don't come to just have dinner and, listen to the minutes being read. If you're coming and I can honestly say, and Jason's been there and John's in there, I don't have the best lodge in the world. I've got a good core group of brothers who get it, right? And they're all there for the same reasons. The rest of them,
Tyler's shit though.
The Tyler sucks. But the majority of them they're never going to get it. There's nothing we're going to say to them to say, oh, why are the officers doing this weird thing? Or why are we having quiet time before lodge opens? Or why are they being so purposeful when it comes to opening and not getting it done quickly? You know, that kind of stuff. Like, they're never going to get it. And the thing I've learned, and I'm going to be a Mason for 20 years this June.
Congrats.
Holy crap. Yeah.
Congrats.
Is I'm okay with not pleasing everybody. Like, as long as me and the 9 other buddies that I'm there to see all the time are there for the same reason, and we're moving, you know, we're all rowing in the same direction down the river, I don't care about anybody else anymore. If you're not there for the same reason as me, or you just don't give a shit, I can't make you happy. And there's nothing I'm going to do or say or put on or a speaker that's going to magically transform these people. They're just not there for the right reason. And we have to be okay with that, because at the end of the day, I need their dues to keep the lights on. And it's a terrible thing to say, but that's where we are in Freemasonry right now. Right?
Well, and I think that comes down to guarding the West Gate, and you're absolutely right.
Man, we're past that point, and John will be happy to talk to you about that. We're way past that point.
We've definitely relegated that duty down.
There is no West Gate. Yeah, there's no West Gate at this point. It's like the ruins, the rubble of the gate is there, and that's it. It's like, hey, there was a gate here once. What happened to it? I wonder.
It's like, let's just fill as many seats as possible.
Yeah,
exactly. But you know, you brought up a good point about altruism. Everybody here is a past master. As a master, you really should be altruistic, in my opinion. And you're serving the lodge. You're not serving your own ego or yourself, right? And
Joe, take notes.
That's
man.
Oh, geez. But well, and
that's awesome.
That was just how I felt in leading and being part of the lodge. I just felt like you should be altruistic and put everybody else's needs. But to Joe's point, you can't please everybody. You're going to piss off people. People are not going to be happy with your decisions. But I always felt if you're doing exactly what you feel is the right thing, and it is, you know, going in the right direction, doing the right things, it doesn't matter if nobody likes you for it.
Yeah,
because you need to actually drive that forward and protect that egregore.
Sorry, Dave. It goes back to what Alex was talking about. What are you doing it for? Like, yeah, I can go with this really big plan, and you know, I'm master for the year, and this is what I want to do, and I'm the master, and what I say goes, and blah blah blah. It doesn't mean anything, right? And it's gonna fall on deaf ears if you're just doing it for yourself. If these are what the guys who actually care about Freemasonry and care about their own journeys in Freemasonry, if this is what they want, yeah, Joe, we want the weird speakers. Yeah, we want quiet, contemplative time before we open lodge. Yeah, we actually want to learn our ritual so that it's done in a really meaningful way. If they're the ones that are coming to you and asking for this, it's your duty to deliver that, right? And not just worry about the me shit. Like when I hear my year, I think all of us, our heads explode when we hear, in my year, blah, blah, blah. Wasn't your year, man. It was the lodge's year. You just got to shepherd it for a while.
And most certainly ain't your year now. So sit down and shut the fuck up.
In my year, Pluto was a planet. Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know.
Poor Pluto.
Listen, if there's anything Dave's learned is don't buy any more sheds. So yeah, but
the
outside
complex.
Oh boy. So let me ask you this: what is the significance of the number 3 in Masonic philosophy? We talk about that, a little sacred geometry, a little proportion of the grand design. Can we talk about that?
Sacred numerology.
I guess yes.
3 was regarded by the Pythagoreans in the cult of Pythagoras in the 5th century before the Common Era, as the perfect number, because 1 represented the monad or monism, you know, the generative principle of Neoplatonic philosophy, or what would later become Neoplatonic philosophy. 2 was a number they detested because it broke away from the 1. And 3 was the reunification that made all things perfect again.
So could you equate that a little bit to the Tetragrammaton idea of the Vav He no,
Yod
is it
Vav
Yod He Vav He kind of thing.
Or the pentagrammaton.
The Pentagrammaton. I didn't know about that one. That's a new one. That's very interesting. Very cool.
So looking at man, this is all stuff that I'm planning to talk about in 2 days at Joe's Lodge, because I'm giving a lecture on.
We'll practice it here.
Heinrich
Yeah, set 'em up,
Cornelius
knock it
Agrippa
down.
No,
and
I claim copyright.
and influences on the Masonic ritual and experience. So when you look at 3, 4, and 5, 3 is not the Tetragrammaton, but it's another collection of Jewish letters, and it's essentially like alludes to the God of prehistorical times, and I'm bastardizing.
You're not talking
the hell out of
Aleph
this.
Mem Shin, are you? Or are you talking something else?
You watch your mouth.
That may be it. That may be it. But when you get to the time of the law, you have the Tetragrammaton, or 4, and then what Agrippa terms the time of grace, which is the Pentagrammaton, where you drop a shin in the middle of the Tetragrammaton, and it transforms from Yahweh or Jehovah to Yeshua, or essentially a really bad misspelling of Yeshua.
Hmm.
I've noticed with a lot of esoteric orders, you need to learn how to badly pronounce Hebrew and Hebrew letters.
Now, Jason, talk a little bit more. Where's
Mispronounce
Agrippa write
everything.
that? Is that a particular book where he's talking about, or where you're pulling that from?
Yes. So that's in Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy. It's in book 2, The Celestial World. And he does an entire section on the powers and properties of numbers.
That's Henry Cornelius Agrippa, correct?
That is, yep.
Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa.
Yep. And so he
Good old
was
Hank.
a Renaissance philosopher and scientist, and he essentially pulled a Manly P. Hall, and he collected all of the known kind of philosophical and mystical works of the time. This was about 1500s or 16th century Renaissance, and he pulled them together into a compendium of 3 books of occult philosophy. Published that in 1533. His mentor was a bishop in the Catholic Church. Funny enough, so he was a man of both science but also religion. And it's these books ended up being the foundation of the Western esoteric tradition, and Western esotericism today owes a lot to Agrippa for, again, appropriating, much like Albert Pike did, all of the known mystical literature of the day and pulling it into one place.
So he did for occultism what Joseph Campbell did for mythology, what Mircea Eliade did for comparative religion, sort of taking it. I mean, these guys, he made like a survey course out of what's been done so much, which is fascinating to me. Very, very cool.
Yep.
Our friend Eric Krogstad, and I just want to, acknowledge the passing of his wife, which is a very sad thing that happened today, recently. But he spoke to me, on many occasions. We've chatted about things that I know nothing about in terms of like Russian Freemasonry and what was going on at the time of the czars in Russia, and how that sort of became a thing, and their use of tarot and so on. So some interesting stuff.
You if you were to write down like Jason's top 10 list, you've already checked off like more than half, and you're still going. So,
Oh, really?
I have a degree in Russian history and Russian foreign policy. I've studied extensively, Freemasonry throughout the Russian Tsarist period, and less so the foundation of the modern Grand Lodge of Russia. But so Nicholas II, the last Tsar of Russia, was very deeply mystical, to the point where I believe Pappus even paid him a visit in Russia. As part of that, I don't know if he was ever a Freemason, because Freemasonry kind of rose and fell throughout Tsarist Russia based on the how pro-Western the Tsar was, because Freemasonry, having originated in England and been kind of throughout Europe, was seen as an inherently Western institution. And so you had tsars like Catherine the Great, who ended up, really tramping down on Freemasonry as she, saw the French Revolution and became more isolationist and more kind of pro-Slav or Slavophile in her policies. And then you see, Freemasonry kind of growing again, and with Tsar Alexander III and Tsar Nicholas the First and Second, and so
Was Rasputin a Mason?
I don't believe so. I don't know. I would have to go look that up.
Look on Wikipedia.
Yeah,
But
I've never heard of him being a Mason, but
so their use of tarot, which is I always mess this guy's name. Is it Glebe, or he wrote the Major Arcana, the Minor Arcana, and a couple of other books. He wrote from that Russian Freemason perspective. How important do you think was tarot for the Russian Freemasons and for that area? This is going to bother me. I'm going to grab the book. I'll be right back. Go ahead.
I have no way to really answer that question. I haven't. A lot of my Russian Freemasonry was, a lot of my Russian Freemasonry study was
Geomebs.
I can't. Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Krogstad recommended this, and there's also a Minor Arcana and a Major Arcana that go with it. So, very interesting stuff.
Okay. And 2 books that will arrive shortly, I'm sure. So kind of my delving into the history of Russian Freemasonry predated my use of tarot as a daily spiritual practice. And I don't have the information to be able to answer either way on that.
What about you guys? I mean, do you use stuff? Obviously, Joe, you've got a big tarot board right behind you there. On the door.
No, tarot for me, personal reflection. I don't use it for divination. It just helps to point me down the right path. We've done several shows on tarot, and you can definitely see its influence on Freemasonry over the years. For sure.
Got it. John?
Yeah, I'm a rule follower, right? So a lot of the weird, spooky stuff that I get into, it's got to like have that traceability back to kind of the milquetoast stuff I grew up with, right? So, my jam is like Christian mysticism, and so many, even creators of the tarot decks, like the A.E. Waite that we know and love, right? It was a Christian mystic, right? Sure. And so he imbued the deck and had Pam Smith use artistry that had symbols of a Christian origin as well. So it's obviously syncretic, but yeah. So I use it very much like Joe in the sense of it is a way to pull Jungian archetypes out to ask myself questions about, what lens should I look at this problem I'm having today through? That's it. And, because, you think growing up in a religious system, again, pre-Masonry being the outer porch for me, right? Tarots were a cult. They were dangerous. They were evil, right? They were satanic even. But yet you dispel those rumors when you actually do your research. You figure out where these things came from. You figure that they are tools. They are not evil in themselves. So nothing is evil. Nothing is good or evil. It just is.
It's cardstock printed in China. What matters is your intent and the energy that you spew into those cards.
Your manifestation and egregore.
So I would say I maybe differ slightly in my approach to tarot from Joe and John, because I try to form a relationship with my deck through energy work and charging. And I don't think it is the divine speaking to me through that deck, but like I try to use energy and personal manifestation as a part of my tarot practice. I still think it's 78 different lenses to view any given situation. I just try to get that harmonic resonance that we talked about with egregores in the past, but I try to get that to a point where it opens up my intuition and enables me to really truly kind of bridge the card symbolism with what I'm trying to think about.
Ooh, interesting. Now, Dave, we got a couple minutes left. Do you want to ask any final questions or any thoughts or any questions at all?
So maybe wrap up with, what I'm thinking. If each one of you wants to say, what's one thing about Freemasonry you wish the world knew and, understood?
Don't
all speak at once.
Yeah.
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, you've stumped three guys who like to talk a lot.
So I would say what I wish people understood, especially inside the organization, I wish people understood the transformative power of the organization and its aims. I think that is the most underrated and undersold part of Freemasonry that exists.
Which that was almost my exact same answer, except I wish people on the outside of the organization knew that it was a positively transformative ritual process, that we have this gem, this diamond in the rough, us, and the way society is today, with the way our egos and our passions take over our decisions and who we talk to and how we talk to them. But yet we have this tool that's readily available. There's thousands of lodges worldwide that you could just walk up to and start a journey that could completely reshape and remold who you are. I mean, it's fascinating. It's fascinating that this thing exists, and it's an untapped resource.
Yep. No, I'm probably going to say something similar to both of these fine gentlemen, but yeah, I mean, what I would want the general public to know about Freemasonry, that it's not about secrets. It's about self-mastery, right? And that's the ultimate secret, right? It is using this tool that's been around for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And that tool is called initiation, right? And when performed well and with intent, and you actually explain the symbols and the meaning behind those symbols to people, it teaches you how to transform your soul. And that's something we could definitely use in the world. But yeah, that's the big takeaway. There's no secrets in Freemasonry. The only secret is the one that you find within yourself when you're ready and you're open to learn what it is.
That is,
Alex, do you want to throw something
beautiful
out there too? Thank you guys for that answers, or those answers, I should say.
I Yeah, I would say it's like anything else. And it's funny because Joe and I use the same phrase. I mean, there's only one mountain and there's many paths up it. This is one of them. But ultimately, all of those paths lead to the same place, which is inside us. And it's the discovery that you find there. And the flavor of that path just maybe speaks to you more than others, but it's whatever path you find that ultimately gets you there. And then you transform that path into, you start blazing a new trail that's wholly your own within that larger context. So that's where I would leave it. Dave, what about yourself?
I think I would also disseminate that we are not a satanic cult. We're not the Illuminati.
Good to know.
The biggest thing that I wish people understood inside and outside the fraternity, and echoing exactly what you guys said, it's just that transformation and that inner and self journey, the shadow work that needs to be done. I don't think a lot of our membership appreciates that and understands that. I think they just look at this as a social club. They come out, have dinner. You're alluding to earlier, the guy with the wrapper just sitting in the corner, or people on their phones. In a lot of ways, I wish, everybody put their phone away and nobody was actually sitting there distracted, because when we're inviting deity into the room and we're going through all that, people should be focused. And unfortunately, we're not. Some of us are, don't get me wrong, but.
Fair enough. So I want to thank Joe Martinez, Jason Richards, and John T. Rourke for being with us on the show today. Can't thank you guys enough. You're an absolute wealth of knowledge. Where can people find you for your wonderful take on Freemasonry and life?
The Masonic Roundtable podcast, which has been going for 11 years strong and hundreds of episodes. Hopefully you'll get there, guys. Yeah, we're looking for it because by the way, you guys are doing great work. I want to thank you all for the invitation. Love your back catalog so far. You guys have hit the ground running. And so, as with all things, persistence and time pays off.
And intention.
And intention. Right? Manifest that stuff, guys.
Manifest. We'd love to be on your guys' show sometime if you have the time and have an off night when you have literally nothing else going on. We'd love to be on the show.
We're booked for the next 3 years, but we'll squeeze you in.
All right. Fair enough.
But no, the MasonicRoundtable.com or YouTube at the Masonic Roundtable, and your favorite podcasting app.
That is awesome. So if you found this discussion fascinating, please hit like, subscribe, and comment below. Let us know what your biggest takeaway is from this episode. Obviously, we've covered so many things. And once again, this has been Brothers of the Arcana. My name is Alex Aldea.
I am Brother Dave Ferrigno, and these were Masonic Roundtable.
Absolutely. And thank you, and we will see you next time. Have a great day.
Wow.
God bless.
Manifest that egregore.
Egregore.